Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm joined, as always, by my good buddies Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
Hey, guess what day it is? It's any day. And you grab your local newspaper and you open it up, and maybe it's the lifestyle section or the B section or the whatever section. And you leaf through the pages and you get to the funny pages. Yay! Today we are debating and deliberating the Mount Rushmore of the funny pages. Now, I recognize that it was National Cartoonist Day on May 5th. And then I told that to these guys, and they said, Richard said, Michael said.
What did I say? I don't think I said anything. I think Michael said it first.
Oh, no, sorry. You didn't say anything. There was a balloon that popped up above your head.
Yes, thank you. There's a little thought balloon. And much like Dagwood Bum said, I was just thinking about sandwiches.
Sandwiches. Yeah. And why? Is it my wife? Is it my daughter? If I could make a really bad move here, they look so much alike. The Mount Rushmore of the funny pages is what I think we've kind of debated or discussed.
That was sort of what we workshopped and came up with. It couldn't be comic strips because that sort of implies a multi-panel.
Yes, and
so
funny pages, and they've got even more than just comics, single panel comics or comic strips. There's a lot of other things in the funny pages.
Sure, it could be. There are lots of games,
other features.
I can't wait till Richard's choice of Sudoku.
I'm super stoked. Jumble the scrambled word game.
Okay, so I think maybe why don't we just go with Michael starts?
Okay. Well, this is such a deep topic. I was really surprised. I think there's a couple that automatically jumped to mind as seeming like no-brainer choices, but then I started thinking of like the history of what the comics pages were and what currently is running in comic pages. And I thought it would be nice to have like a really old choice. So, but it was also one that I thought was just wonderful to look at, and that's Little Nemo in Slumberland, Winsor McCay comics from like the turn of the century, from like 1905.
Holy cow!
And these are like full. He would draw. He was an American artist, and he had big full page, like Art Nouveau style comic strips that were about this little boy Nemo who falls asleep and is kind of. The panels are like these just wonderfully detailed, richly colored comic strips about this boy kind of falling asleep and having adventures and being taken into like the Dream King's world and his adventures with his Flip or Flick, I can't remember, his like sidekick, and would get him into all sorts of trouble. And they're just so imaginative and so vivid. And I can't imagine what it would have been like at 1900, 1905 to suddenly open up these, a black and white paper, and then once a week or however often it was published, to have these full colored, highly detailed, highly descriptive like pages just like barfed out at you. It must have been just like kind of like Dorothy going into the land of Oz, just, once a week. Just everything goes from like this kind of, God, I can't imagine what reading the paper would have been like, just blocks and blocks of text and, advertisements for various ointments and tonics. And all of a sudden you're just like in this, magical world. And it wasn't, this was shortly after, a few years before that the idea of like a colored print and colored paper was like even available with they called it I guess one of the first ones was the Yellow Kid, which was kind of where the term yellow journalism came from, but sorry, I was off topic. But like just the idea that the funny pages, the Sunday comics or whatever, have this life in black and white, and then once a week they explode into full color. I don't think it's really better stylized than the Little Nemo comics.
I've heard the name, and I maybe seen some panels in the history of comics type books, but I don't know it.
They had God, it's been forever. I went to an art exhibit of it down in LA. God, this is probably 2005 or 6. And they just had these, I mean, the actual pages that were drawn were these gigantic. I'm holding up my hands so the podcasters can see us, all our listeners. I mean, they're huge. But they're just, I think I'm definitely more, the stories are very whimsical and feature like, Nemo falling asleep in his bed, growing long legs and walking through the city. And then eventually by the last panel, he always kind of wakes up, nothing bad ever really happens to him, really. But the art itself is just so amazingly detailed. One thing that I remember is that all of the outlines of things were in kind of like a much heavier width. And then all of like the interior art within a particular panel or particular cartoon, like a character, was a much finer point. And I remember looking at it just being, God, the amount of time just spent on this is just must have been so daunting, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it's obviously worth it. It's there's some comics and some strips that you see and they look so simple and things are so stylized or so graphic or so simple. It's like, okay, I can see how someone can bang out 5 of these a week and one on Sunday or whatever, but to have this full page thing is just incredible.
And McKay is the guy he's the Gertie the Dinosaur guy, the guy who did that animation. I guess he would present this animated film of this. He's the first guy to do animated dinosaurs, and he would do a live interaction where he was pretending to kind of train this dinosaur. That's interesting. As a kid, I don't think I ever puzzled out the reason, but I always was amazed by how a daily strip storyline would be 4 panels that would feature the least dynamic action you'd ever seen in your life, maybe except for Spider-Man. Like if Gasoline Alley, it would be 3 panels where somebody says something back to them, and then there's a witty rejoinder at the end, maybe while the person is staring at the frame. And then the Sundays, especially like Calvin and Hobbes, might be 4 boring frames, black and white, but the Sunday thing was this incredibly fantastical Lewis Carroll through the rabbit hole kind of story with 2 different universes happening, the imaginary universe and the real universe. And I didn't learn till later that they had 2 different production. I knew as a kid that whatever storyline I was following in Mary Worth or Mark Trail or whatever didn't happen on the weekends. On the weekends, they had a whole different thing. It was like them. Mark Trail was trying to nurse a rhino back to health or something.
Or he'd lecture you about like the mating habits of deer.
Yeah. But you'd wonder, like, are you taking a break from the poacher, plot line or something that was going on during the week? But they would need to do a different. They couldn't do the same plot line because the Sunday took so long to do. I guess they would have to work 3-4 weeks ahead on that one, whereas the other one would be like a week ahead. All right, Richard, what do you got?
Well, Jeff, you mentioned it. Calvin and Hobbes.
Calvin and Hobbes.
My first.
Yeah, also on my list. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the I think no-brainers that Michael was talking about. Again, in terms of, I think really, the artwork that went into Calvin and Hobbes in particular, like you said, Jeff, the Sunday panels, where you would have these regressions into Calvin's imagination, where everything looked like, one day it could be like Voyage to the Center of the Earth or a John Carter novel, or whatever the dinosaurs, whatever the inspiration happened to be that week. And they were these amazing drawings, and these that just stood out amongst your typical family circus. Let's trace Jeffy's path around the neighborhood. It just came off as something completely fresh and different. I think in terms of the actual comic itself, I think it did an amazing job of capturing kind of the reality of what being a 6-year-old is really like, even a preternaturally like smart 6-year-old like Calvin is supposed to be. At least smart in terms of being streetwise. I don't know about school wise, but yeah, definitely a different type of kid than you had ever seen really in the comic books. A lot of the comic book kids were wiser than their years, but they didn't have that sense of hyperactivity and sort of imagination run amok that you would often see with Calvin and Hobbes. And I just appreciate the fact that Bill Watterson got out when he did. He took a couple of sabbaticals during his time drawing Calvin and Hobbes, and eventually got to the point where he decided, you know what, I think I'm out of story ideas. I think I'm good. And he got out before the jokes became stale or before they became reruns of previous gags that he had done 10 years before. I just really appreciate the fact that he went out on a high note.
Yeah. You talked about the yellow kid earlier, and there was no shortage of precocious young people. And I think like the structure of like a fable, having a message delivered through from the mouths of babes is a way for a good kind of satirist or communicator to get the word across. But so I felt like obviously Bill Watterson was standing on the shoulders of his predecessors, and I think especially like Charles Schulz, who started to explore the neuroses of young people and how they were not too dissimilar than the neuroses of adults. But I think it was also interesting how Calvin's parents weren't Ward and June Cleaver either. When confronted with Calvin's weirdness, they didn't tell him to stop being weird necessarily, but I think father did not know best. He just knew to just kind of give him some room to do whatever.
As long as he's not actively breaking something or hurting something.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were very sardonic. And so you can see where Calvin naturally got that sort of humor and personality traits through his parents. And they were also just frequently really exasperated, which having had very active imagination 6-year-old kids in the past, I can tell you that's a very real thing. So anytime you saw Calvin making a snowman that looks like it was being shot with arrows or whatever it happened to be, and his mom just had made that hand in hand in her face kind of look. I understand completely now where they're coming from with that. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was always this is like my favorite comic growing up. I don't remember us reading it week in and week out. We didn't get the paper or anything. I think my dad would get the Sunday paper, and so we'd get the full half page or full page Calvin and Hobbes spread. We definitely had like the books. I had every book. I had the collections of the books. I had like the big collections in the smaller ones, and like all the things that led up to that were published afterwards. And what I think is what Watterson does that's so amazing in that is it's something that you alluded to earlier. It's the ability to tell a story within 3 or 4 panels and do it day after day over the course of a couple weeks. He'd tell a story about Calvin and Hobbes, using the cardboard box to go back in time. And it would continue. You'd have to tell a complete story within any given day. And then you tell a story from over the course of, 2 weeks. And so that's, 10 comics. And I think his ability to keep so many of these things going, and like, Calvin is so imaginative, whether it was with the GROSS, get rid of slimy girls, or like his dedication to his favorite magazine, Chewing, which was all about like chewing gum, or whether it was using the box as a transmogrifier or a duplicator or a time machine,
or Calvin ball,
or the The snowman, the snowman is interesting. And I think that is one of those things about the comic that was so great, is that it felt very much cyclical and year round. Like in the winter, he would get to winter comics, and they would be about being in the winter and being in the snow, and you get to summer and they're about, exploring in the outdoors. And so you'd read like a year's worth and it would be like, okay, this kid and this person is giving a year-long experience. And they were always, even though sometimes he would use a cardboard box, he would use it for different things. And that's just, like Richard, you talked about the spirit of like Calvin's imagination, and then always having Hobbes there to, knock him down for you, prove him wrong. Yeah. And it's just wonderful. I think also, like he didn't cash in on it more than the republishing of the books. He didn't turn them into something else. He didn't have a cartoon.
He's not getting money off of the Calvin peeing on a fork logo.
There was a time when I was like, like youthfully indignant at all the people that had those, where I was so possessive of my love of Calvin and Hobbes and Bill Watterson that I was like, I can't believe that someone would even buy these bootleg things. And then, but yeah, he was very much a true artist to his nature, and he wanted to say with the characters what he wanted to say within the comic, and he didn't want them to be bastardized or have another voice put on them or another change to the thing that he put down. And like, God, not many people kind of have that thought about their things. They wanted to get out to as many people as possible and make all that dough.
I do think Calvin stood out. Well, as a kid, I thought cartoons were for kids. Like I knew my parents weren't watching animated Saturday morning programming. But so when you'd open up the newspaper and see a Peanuts or see Calvin or see these other comics, it was also befuddling for me to read something like, it was an Apartment 2G, or there was like Mary Worth, or the
Rex Morgan MD.
Yeah, Rex Morgan MD, the grown-up comics, and wonder like, why do they want this? Like that, who reads this? I don't know that my parents read this, but it befuddled me that there were adult comics, because it seemed like cartoons were kids stuff to me. But that's one thing that I've always kind of befuddled by, was every year there's 100 new shows on TV and 99 of them get canceled, but comics stay forever. Like if there's a comic strip in there, that sucker, what does it take to get something canceled? Who was reading Gasoline Alley? Who was reading The Wizard of Id after so many years of being in there? Beetle Bailey started as a strip where he was in college, then it was in World War II, I think, and then
and it's like High and Lois's brother, like one of their like cousins or something, which I didn't know. But Beetle apparently it's Beetle Bailey is part of the High and Lois universe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Very strange. But you're right.
Their dark universe.
Yeah, you're right, Jeff. I mean, there are all of these legacy comics that are like now 10 times removed from the original creator of the comic.
Yeah.
But there's still like this style guide, and this is how this has to be. It's been interesting. Recently, Mark Trail, they switched writers and animators. They've gone with a completely different animation style than what it's had for 50, 60 years. And they've gone for a very self-referential kind of tone to it. So it's been interesting to see this one legacy comic attempting to adapt to kind of a modern comics universe.
I thought the Mark Trail guy actually did High and Lois or something. Maybe it was the Riots or something like that, but they were like the same artist drew it, or I'm not sure. Well, anyway, what's your second one, Richard?
No, I'm on my second one. I am on my second one.
Well, because we had you're right.
You have the joint one. So I got to go again. So my second choice, it would be insane to have a Mount Rushmore of the funny pages without having Charlie Brown on there.
Okay.
So Peanuts. The Michael Jordan of comics.
Yeah.
500-pound gorilla. The one when you start thinking of comics, you think, oh yeah, Peanuts, obviously
Yeah.
the greatest one ever. Whether or not it actually is the greatest one ever, whether you feel that way about it or not, it's just sort of it's at the top of the canon. And you mentioned it, Jeff. I mean, they found a way to, Charles Schultz found a way to present these kids in a way that wasn't too cloying, but it also wasn't too cynical. He found that kind of like sweet spot to kind of make the kids adult enough so that adults reading the comics would relate to them, but also childlike enough so that actual kids could read it and feel like, oh, that's speaking to me. And I think that's an incredibly difficult thing for any comic to do. And I think Charles Schultz was probably, because I don't know, did kids see themselves in the Katzenjammer kids?
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. I certainly don't think adults did, but that was the case with the Peanuts.
Mhm.
And the other reason I really have Peanuts on the list is I think in terms of its popularity and its ability to cross over into mainstream and commercial success, it was really a pioneer in that category. I mean, you had comics like Little Abner, for example, which was insanely popular in its time, which they sold everything from including up to and including Chesterfield cigarettes, and
A
any
Broadway
other.
musical.
There was a Broadway musical. There were movies. You had all of that. I think Peanuts kind of took that ability, that success, and kind of ran with it. So that now, when there's probably a whole generation of kids who are now adults who see Snoopy and immediately think of MetLife,
Yeah.
right, or Knott's Berry Farm, or
Mhm.
Dolly Madison, or whatever it happens to be. I don't think they ever sold cigarettes. That's probably the one thing they didn't sell. You didn't see Linus smoking a Winston
Yeah.
or anything like that.
No advertisements of Joe Cool back to back with Joe Camel. Just
No, Joe actually smoked Cools.
That makes sense.
But no, I think that Peanuts is, I think stylistically it was something that was unique, that really kind of set a template for everything like Calvin and Hobbes and any of your other kid sort of centric comic books or comic strips. And at the same time, I think it was a commercial revolution in the idea of comics and who they could appeal to.
Yeah. I think the Family Circus had a preponderance of adults intervening in the kids' existential self-questioning, so much that they didn't really have it. Whereas Peanuts reminded me of somewhat like kind of like Our Gang. The Our Gang comedies, I think, might have been a precedence for it, in that it was a world of kids in which they maybe sometimes a cop was chasing them, or somebody would, they try to bribe an old lady with some plug nickels or something like that to get a pie. But for the most part, it was a world of kids, and they had their aching romance moments, and their pains, and their go-karts that fell apart and stuff like that. And
Right.
And I felt like Peanuts did kind of set all that, and then it even evolved in those. I don't know when it was. Was it in the '60s or the mid '60s or late '60s, when I think Schultz ran out of angst to do with the kids and just said, "Let's make Snoopy a World War II pilot, or World War I fighting ace, or something like that."
Yeah, that definitely would have been the 60s. Yeah.
Yeah. So because I remember him also saying that it wasn't until after, I think, one of the animated specials that he gave Snoopy that many kind of like verbal things, like the kind of sounds. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely kind of like up in the Beatles. That's on the Rushmore, but likely.
Yeah, no, it's hard to kind of get away from it. And the way that the comic translated to television, this fairly new medium, and nobody knew with a Charlie Brown Christmas whether it's going to be a hit or a miss, or it's going to be a complete bust. And now you think of Peanuts and you almost think of the TV episodes and specials as much as you do the daily strips.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see if the Snoopy show gets picked up for another season on Apple.
I haven't seen it yet. I don't
yeah.
have Apple, so
It's charming, and it has the jazz. Also as a young person, Peanuts specials were the only place you're going to hear jazz on
That's
TV.
true.
Unless you're watching Steve Allen or something like that.
Which all the kids were watching.
All the
back in
kids
the day.
clamoring.
More Steve Allen.
Yeah. Hey, he was going to interview Jack Kerouac. I want to see that. Okay, guys, we are at halftime, and at this point, we're going to ask you to do us a solid and go back and download, rate, and review past episodes. Oh, and listen to them while you're at it. Hey, I guess you'd have to. That's Jay Leno, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. You want to listen to it?
Just wait until they come out in the collected editions.
The collected anthologies.
Go get the Mount Rushmore omnibus. The essential Mount Rushmore podcast in print form.
The days are just packed. The Mount Rushmore collection. There's somebody doing that funny comic strip, the Mount Rushmore without Mount Rushmore. It's just have you seen the one Garfield without Garfield? Yeah. Okay, yeah. And then do us a solid, make a suggestion for a future episode. It would be really cool to hear what you want to hear. So you can do that on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, where we have a thriving active audiences and people and friends and stuff like that, posting every hour.
Yeah, the Rush Hive, as we call it out there. Yeah. They stand for us.
The Rush Hive. That would be so awesome. We're the other holy trinity of Rush. We're not Getty and friends. Okay, so we are back, and I think we haven't heard from Winfield in a while. So what is your third?
Okay, another comic that is impossible to talk about without just thinking about this comic completely is Garfield.
Yes.
Now listen, Garfield is not an amazing comic strip. I did have all of the Calvin and Hobbes and the little collected editions. I also had a ton, if not all, of like the Family Circus. They had these little small books of Family Circus books.
Huh.
And I had all the Garfield books. I had all of them.
Yeah.
I had several too. Yeah.
Garfield
Gets
eats
fat.
his own weight, gets fat. Garfield even larger.
Garfield gets type 2 diabetes.
Well, Calvin and Hobbes, I wanted to choose this as like an opposing pick to Calvin and Hobbes, where Calvin and Hobbes, Richard kind of mentioned it, was one that ran for 10 years. He was done. He was like the Breaking Bad of comic strips. He told a story. He didn't let it go on farther than it needed to, and he was good with it. Artistically, perfect. Garfield is like the Simpsons of comic strips, where it's like, why is this thing still going? Who are the people that is interested in a Garfield comic strip? You guys kind of chatted about it on the other half, on the top half of the show, was that like these things that just go on and people are just like, is Jim Davis still writing it? Maybe. He's definitely not drawing it anymore. But Garfield was so interesting in that it was, it had a changing art style over the years. It certainly went from being kind of like, he was kind of grittier and kind of uglier. And over like the course of the years, he definitely kind of almost got, hate to use the term, but kind of like Disney-fied. He became more of a cartoon. He became something that was easier to draw. He became more circular and turned into kind of like a Mickey Mouse type character, where he was a lot easier to draw than this kind of like, late 70s, early 80s kind of fat, gritty, constantly. He was kind of an ugly cat to start. And then he just kind of turned into the thing that's stuck to Windows. But Garfield too was one of those that just like immediately understood its extension into different media. in the mid 80s, I think that they started doing kind of their cartoon series. Obviously, the kind of sticky Garfield thing that went on cars, coffee mugs, calendars, stuffed animals. And I just don't, it just keeps going. And I think there's a longevity, and it's like, it's the person that would be upset if The Simpsons went off the air. It's the person that would write in asking, why isn't Garfield in my comic strip? It's probably comforting to a lot of people. It's certainly not funny. It's just kind of there.
Yeah.
Michael, do you remember when I sent you the online Garfield strip, and then all of the comments that people had made on a particular day about Garfield?
This is probably
it's insane.
It is one of my favorite things that exists in the internet, is the idea that, I think it's like comicstrip.com/Garfield or whatever it is. I don't know the exact website. But basically you can read like the daily comic strips, and you can read Garfield. And for some dumbass reason, there is a commentary function underneath. And it takes about 2 to 7 comments before it starts getting like really political. And it's just people that just start like mouthing off, and Garfield's eating lasagna for the 900 millionth time. It's like, well, Joe Biden doesn't want you to eat meat lasagna anymore, so why would Garfield? And you're just like, well, what is happening in America? And you realize, oh, they live on a Garfield message board, and they're just commenting at each other, and you're like, oh, okay, that explains it. Yes, Richard, I thank you forever for that gift.
I appreciate always the people who kind of just comment with, "Go Garfield, go!" Like Garfield is like a real person or a real cat who can hear them and understand them.
Oh my God!
Do you think you heard? So 82 was the first Garfield with Lorenzo Music as the voice.
Wow, 82, that early.
I think there were special,
because it started coming out in 78. Wow, that really is fast.
So that's 4 years pretty fast to get that to be that popular. So I wonder if most people who might be listening, if it 4 years into it, the voice of Garfield was set in media for us. I wonder if your comment regarding the streamlining of the character was something that might have even been done for the sake of animation. And then if Garfield was enhanced in his popularity by the idea that we feel like we could really hear that voice. I don't know.
What an immediate like feedback loop. That must have happened a lot. When I was kind of looking through like the history of like comics or American obviously, I don't know, Richard, did you have any like other comics from other countries in this list?
No, I don't.
But like for like American comics, like like Little Orphan Annie was one that started out as a comic strip and then quickly turned into like a radio show. And like I'm sure there's a lot of like just feedback. One thing kind of what's the word I'm thinking of? One kind of like speaks to another and causes changes in one aspect, and it kind of goes back and forth.
Synergistic, synchronistic.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So
Garfield.
The Garfield.
He's fat.
And refer back. Hey, I should have. I kind of wish this would have came before the halftime. I would say, didn't we have a Garfield versus Heathcliff debate hotly centered in a previous episode? It seems like we did.
Feel like we did. If we have, we'll set that up.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe I might have commented that the music video for the Stray Cats and Stray Cat Strut is basically a Heathcliff cartoon come to life.
A good thing we didn't get into any hot Heathcliff versus Top Cat debate.
Oh God,
no.
We don't need that. More controversy.
We don't need the message board coming after us on that one. Mm-hmm. We like both dirty cats where they are.
Wow. So Frank Welker replaced Lorenzo Music, and then of course Bill Murray's been in it. But All right. So, Manfredi, what's your third?
All right, my third choice is The Far Side.
Oh,
And I think that's I wanted to take advantage of the idea that we're not just about multi-panel strips.
Yeah.
That the funny pages can have these single panel, whether it's Family Circus or any of these other sort of single panel cartoons.
And
And
another series of books that I have every one of down in a box in the garage. Yeah.
I think most of our generation
Mhm.
does.
Yeah.
I think it has the greatest hit to miss ratio
Mm.
of any comic strip, particularly the single panel ones. Because if you read any of the ones that are out today or in the ones that have come before, yeah, every once in a while you'll get one that's amusing, but you've got to go through some stinkers to get to the really funny ones. And Gary Larson delivered time and time again with just something weird and funny. It was like the first comic page cartoon that I remember that wasn't afraid to be weird.
yeah.
It never went for a cheap joke. It always assumed that the reader was smart enough to get whatever gag that they were going after. Like for example, when one gorilla is grooming the female gorilla is grooming the male gorilla and pulls out a blonde hair and goes, blonde hair again. Is that Jane Goodall tramp again? Just
Yeah.
sort of like you can make that joke and just assume that the audience knows who Jane Goodall is and understands the gag there. And it's just got this high level of rereadability. Like, Michael said, there's a reason why everyone has all of these Far Side comics. And I passed my books on to my kids when they got to be old enough to read and understand them. Not only are the jokes these, great setups and punchlines, but the drawings have all these great small details in them that just make their rereadability, I think, incredibly high. One of my favorite Far Side comics, and I know that I'm trying to explain a comic in an audio way, and it's just going to be a failure no matter how you do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Was just a dog with an open washing machine that had cat food scrawled on it, and him going, "Oh please, oh please, oh please, oh please." But the fact that it didn't say cat food, it said cat fud, FUD. For whatever reason, the fact that the dog couldn't spell food correctly just made the gag that much funnier. And so it's like the little stuff like that that kind of went into the Far Side. And again, Gary Larson, somebody who got burned out, decided to stop on his own terms. He even said when he announced that he was going to be retiring the Far Side, he basically said that he didn't want it to go into the graveyard of mediocre cartoons. So again, another comic that went out when it was on top. Although
Take that, Marmaduke.
Yeah, take that. What was the one what's the one in Parade? There's like a really giant dog, but it's not Marmaduke. Anyway, somebody.
Clifford? No.
No. It's but it's like Clifford the Big Red Dog. I'm gonna look this up right now because it's gonna drive me nuts.
A friend used to make a habit of reading the Marmaduke caption on Family Circus. So you read that's how you make those comics funny, to switch captions. So if there might be 3 people at a table, a breakfast table, mom, the kids, the caption is, "He's licking me, he's licking me." So it just has this surreal Dali-esque kind of
that happened one time with Family Circus and Far Side. They got the captions mixed up.
Oh, did they really? Oh, that's funny.
And so there's a caption. Because by the way, it's Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes.
Yeah, is the giant dog in Parade magazine. So now you know. But yeah, it would happen to be a really bizarre sort of. It wasn't just like kind of a mix up, but I want to say the Family Circus kids wound up saying something like, I've got it right here. Oh, it's Dennis the Menace. I take that back. My bad. It was Dennis the Menace. And
oh, sorry, it was an obituary. Sorry, it was an obituary.
And the mom is like on the phone, and Dennis is going with Joey, and Joey says something like, or Dennis says something, in the mixed up comic to the effect of, oh no, not hamsters again. As he's like eating a sandwich.
That's funny.
It was just turned out to be perfect.
The Far Side is so interesting because it works so well within the realm of being the comics, and obviously we've kind of talked about not only their lives, within the comic pages, but also like, in the real world. They work so well as a mug, as a daily calendar, as something that you would maybe have a T-shirt for, or like a big monthly calendar. But they didn't work as well as like a cartoon, as like an animated series. I think they tried that, and it just wasn't. It didn't quite capture the immediacy of a single panel comic, because it's a one joke thing. It's you're in and you're out. You read it. It's funny. It's not it's not a bit. It's not 5 minutes. There's no real setup and punchline. You take everything in all at once. And I think sometimes you think those things will translate to being funny, but sometimes they're just like, no, it's just, I don't want to see this in a different format other than reading it in a paper or a book or whatever, or on a mug, I guess.
Funny, Richard, I think your comment, made a comment earlier, and I was thinking about how the Far Side, how these comics are kind of strange bedfellows. They seem to be such different worlds, and I guess it's not dissimilar to switching channels on your TV. You'll see all different types of entertainment, and there you have different types of audiences. But the Far Side definitely felt more like something out of Mad Magazine, and it almost felt like a thing that could have been more close to the editorial page type of cartoons, just not because it was political, but just it was more just weird. It wasn't this cutesy thing for little kids. It just had an oddness to it. So
I think when you think about nerd culture being a thing nowadays, I think the fact that the Far Side became as mainstream popular as it did was an early example of nerd culture going mainstream, because it really was kind of a nerd comic when it started.
Yeah. Fun. All right. It is, oh gosh, it's Mike's last chance.
Yeah. And don't worry.
Final panel.
Witty rejoinder.
It's not going to be funny.
Oh shit.
It's what you kind of alluded to earlier as well, Jeff. It's the unfunny serious comics that plague a funny page that you just breeze right on past. And I don't have one in particular, whether it's Rex Morgan MD or Mary Worth or Apartment 3G or any of these that like they appeal to a certain person that I just don't get, and I've never read one, and maybe they're good. I'm not that person. I couldn't key into it when I was a kid or a teenager, and certainly as an adult. Like, I don't have the time to invest in all the different things that Mary Worth is advising you to do or not do, all of her advice, or to see whatever's going to happen with the good doctor Rex Morgan. Like, it's just like those things, they're so strange and they're so out of place within this world, but they have no other place to be. Mm-hmm. I know that sometimes there are some comics like Life in Hell that never really lived within a funnies page, that only kind of lived on like alternative magazines, like on page 2 or 3 of like, the
LA Weekly or
something. The LA Weekly or the Seattle Weekly or whatever. That it seems so strange that mentality was never accepted within the world of the funny pages. Yet you'd see something like I guess Doonesbury, or you'd see I guess maybe not quite Doonesbury, a little bit Doonesbury. I don't know. I never cared about it. Mm-hmm. It was one of those that there are certain ones. And I think that's the thing about the funny pages, is that they, if you're reading them constantly, there's a certain number of things that you read. I don't know who is the person that reads every every comic in there? Who is the person that's the diehard Calvin and Hobbes fan and also a Beetle Bailey fan?
That is an interesting
Also
thing.
reading Blondie.
I
Like, you know, if you,
recall as a kid maturing into the next category, like being a Peanuts kid, and then I somehow just kind of get caught up in the plot line of Blondie. Like I don't identify with tag, but I don't know how I would ever care. But even
were you hitting puberty at the time?
I guess it could have been. There was a lot. They had a lot to offer in that to somebody like that. But yeah, I think maybe they're just hoping you age into it. It's like the beverage aisle at your grocers. You know, you'll have there's the young people stuff and then the old people stuff, and they'll have something to offer.
I think it's the people who watch soap operas.
Yeah,
the people who are reading these soap opera comics, your Mary Worths, etc. Because who doesn't love some hot meddling action?
Yeah,
some old biddy inserting herself into the lives of the Charterstone community.
Well, that's a good point. Like, think of soap operas getting that name because they appeal to persons who are at home doing the domestic type of stuff, buying the detergents and stuff. So I imagine those same people go to the newspaper for entertainment, and so that must be the same, appealing to the same audience. Yeah. Wow. I can't.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there isn't a market for it, but I think that the funny pages are such a snapshot of. You can pick out whatever you're going to pick out of it. Like, if you're reading through, it's almost like, I don't know, Richard, does this make sense? If you're like someone that's into baseball and you bought a newspaper and you're reading, you know, a game digest or a box score, do you think you generally be a person that would just read one for your own team, or would you kind of look through all of them and say, oh, I guess the A's beat the Mariners last night, and it was 8-3, and this person got a hit, and da-da-da-da. I mean,
well, I guess
I don't know.
I have a hard time kind of disassociating myself as a kid who did read every box score and read all that kind of crap versus a modern person who maybe, it's the person who watches SportsCenter all the way through and doesn't just watch for their team's highlights or for the highlights of the one big game. So I guess there's people like that.
I'm just, I know that there are people that are like, oh, I read the New York Times, cover to cover. I read the Sunday edition, every page of it. And it's like, okay, pat yourself on the back. Do you read every comic too? Get out of here. You're Mary Worth.
All right. Last one, Manfredi.
All right. So I wanted to do one that was political in nature because in looking back on it, I was shocked at how much my own kind of political awakening was tied to reading certain comics in the funny pages. And I wanted to go Doonesbury, but I remembered that in my local rag, Doonesbury was actually part of the editorial pages. Not the funny pages. So I felt like I couldn't, in good conscience, select Doonesbury. So I went with Bloom County instead.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the few comics at the time that was really geared towards adults in a comedic way. I mean, like Michael said, you had all of these Mary Worths and Rex Morgans and what have you that were adult cartoons in a very dramatic sense. But Bloom County was definitely targeted toward an adult audience who understood surrealistic kind of humor. And it made you feel like, I think it was the first comic that I can remember that made you feel like that you were part of like a big inside joke. Like when you read Bloom County and you read it you read it every day and you had all of the books and collections and everything. You felt like you were part of this like insular world. Like, hey, I get it. And if you ran into somebody else who liked Bloom County, you're like, oh, wow, hey, we're on the same page here. That we're simpatico. And they had their inside jokes that they ran with, whether it was constantly talking about the shrinking of comic pages or all the times they would break the fourth wall, which isn't something you would see in other comics. or even the fact that they decided to debut their own anti-Garfield character, which was Bill the Cat.
Yeah.
Who wound up becoming as marketable as Garfield was, which which is kind of a fascinating thing that happened. And yeah, for me, so much of being a kid in the 80s, what I knew about politics, I learned about UN Ambassador Jean Kirkpatrick, not so much because of the news, but because Bill the Cat was dating her in the comic book. That sort of thing. That was really kind of the value of Bloom County to me.
It kind of wrapped. By the time I got to college, it seems like it ended, right? And then Outland started, or what was it? Outland, yeah.
It probably would have been I'm gonna look that up real quick.
89, because I think I remember actually mistaking it for Doonesbury because I thought some of the illustration was kind of similar. Like I felt like he was inspired a little bit by Trudeau for it, but I feel you in that it seemed like it was kind of like your inside joke, the kind of adult it in that it had satire in it, whereas other comics for young people didn't actually have that. But yeah, I kind of missed out on that one. I felt like by the time it was wrapping up, I was
you're a little bit too old for the demographic.
Maybe
Bloom County was definitely the older, cooler comic that like my older, cooler cousin Christian was into.
Yeah,
he had definitely an Opus and a Bill the Cat shirt. He had like the collected Bloom County comics, and he's, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years older than me, and he was like just this cool punk kid. And it's like, oh yeah, the cool guy was in. This is what the guy that was crazy gluing pencils into his hair to make Liberty spikes was into. I was like, okay, yeah, all right,
yeah, it was definitely
not my bag.
It was definitely the college rock to like Peanuts,
yeah,
like
yeah.
pop, top 40 pop.
All right, okay, guys. So Jeff Hopkins is going to pick in 4 panels. Going to pick this. The first panel, I'm sitting down with cereal, and
Golden Grams, or is it which one?
Honey Bunches of Oats.
Honey Bunches of Oats. There.
Okay, yeah. What's the one? I love when the cereal does the just oats, or like it'll do its spin-off. It'll do its Outland
Cinnamon Bunches of Oats.
Cinnamon. Well, like yeah. What was the one that was just crunch? Like all crunch berries, or something. Versus,
oh yeah, Captain Crunch.
Yeah.
Boy, Richard, that is something that we need to discuss. How come there hasn't been like crossovers within like the cereal universe?
Oh wow!
How come there's never been a Captain Crunch comic book?
No. I mean, like
Guest,
why
yes.
have
like
why
purple clovers in Life cereal or
yeah, General Mills owns X number of like cereals and cereal mascots. How come you can't like get a bunch of Lucky Charms like in your sugars, cocoa, just get them all mixed up.
Guest.
I'm looking up cereal crossovers right now.
Look up cereal,
and there is a Lucky Charms Frosted Flakes.
Okay.
That makes my mouth burn just even
that doesn't sound great.
Okay, going Calvin and Hobbes. Going let's see. Going Little Nemo just because it seems historical. Far Side because iconic.
Yeah.
And then let's do Peanuts because iconic. So I hope that satisfies you, gentlemen. But I'm disappointed we didn't talk about the horoscope. And Landers. See, what else would be there? Like Sudoku.
Yeah, like I said, Jumble, the scrambled word game.
Yeah, Jumble, the acrostic.
Sudoku.
Yeah. There's those things that were very important.
Oh, the Omar. I had Omar Sharif's bridge.
No, that's right.
His bridge tips.
God, that's
Oh, Richard, you should have put that 4 and just didn't need to explain anything, and you would have gotten 4 points just off of Jeff just then.
I booted that one a little bit.
I love Vincent Price's daily recipe. Like all the things that like that you would just look at as a kid and go, "What the fuck is this? This is the weirdest thing." Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, guys, this has been the Mount Rushmore of Funny Pages. I, as always, am Jeff.
I'm Richard.
And Michael.
What a fun chat.
Yeah.